Welcome to Spiritual Calisthenics. Christ is in our midst. On January 30th, we commemorate the Synaxis of the three Hierarchs, St. Basil the Great, St. Gregory the Theologian, and St. John Chrysostom. We also celebrate St. Hippolytos, Pope of Rome, and St. Athanasia the Martyr and her three daughters. Regarding the Synaxis of the three Hierarchs, St. Basil the Great, St. Gregory the Theologian, and St. John. This common feast of these three teachers was instituted a little before the year 1100, during the reign of Emperor Alexius I Komnenos, because of a dispute and strife that arose among the notable and virtuous men of that time. Some of them preferred St. Basil, while others preferred St. Gregory, and yet others preferred St. John Chrysostom, quarreling amongst themselves over which of the three was the greatest. Furthermore, each party, in order to distinguish itself from the others, assumed the name of its preferred saint. Hence they called themselves Basilians, Gregorians, or Ioannites. Desiring to bring an end to the contention, the three saints appeared together to the saintly John Mavropulos, a monk who had been ordained bishop of Edfied, a city of Asia Minor. They revealed to him that the glory they have at the throne of God is equal, and told him to compose a common service for the three of them, which he did with great skill and beauty. St. John of the Edfied, whom we commemorate on October 5th, is also a composer of the canon to the guardian angel, the protector of a man's life. In his old age, he retired from his episcopal see and again took up the monastic life at a monastery in Constantinople. He reposed during the reign of the aforementioned Emperor Alexius I Komnenos. The three most great luminaries of the three-sun divinity have illumined all of the world with the rays of doctrines divine and true. They are sweetly flowing rivers of wisdom, who with godly knowledge have watered all creation in clear and mighty streams. The great and sacred Basil and the theologian, wise Gregory, together with the renowned John, the famed Chrysostom of golden speech, let us all who love their divinely wise words come together, honoring them with hymns, for ceaselessly they offer entreaty for us to the Trinity. Receive, O Lord, the sacred heralds who preach God, the pinnacle of teachers, unto the enjoyment of your riches and rest. You receive their labors and their sufferings, as being above and beyond all fruitful offering, for you alone glorify your saints. From the Matins Gospel according to St. John, the Lord said, I am the door. If anyone enters by me, he will be saved and will go in and out and find pasture. The thief comes only to steal and kill and destroy. I came that they may have life and have it abundantly. I am the good shepherd. The good shepherd lays down his life for the sheep. He was a hireling, not a shepherd, whose own the sheep are not, sees the wolf coming and leaves the sheep and flees, and the wolf snatches them and scatters them. He flees because he is a hireling and cares nothing for the sheep. I am the good shepherd. I know my own, and my own know me, as the Father knows me, and I know the Father, and I lay down my life for the sheep. And I have other sheep that are not of this fold. I must bring them also, and they will heed my voice, that there shall be one flock, one shepherd. So this gospel passage, which is the prototypical gospel passage for hierarchs, shows us the hierarchs are the shepherd. They are trying to bring the sheep to Christ, who is the actual good shepherd, who lays down his life for the sheep. And each of the three hierarchs certainly laid down their lives in various ways and forms for the sheep of God. And there should be one pasture, one flock. And so there should never be division. There should never be a contention of which bishop is greater than another, or which priest is greater than another, which theologian is greater than another, because we are all striving to bring people to Christ. From St. Paul's letter to the Hebrews, Brethren, remember your leaders, those who spoke to you the word of God. Consider the outcome of their lives and imitate their faith. Each of these hierarchs suffered many things, but their faith never wavered. Their leadership never wavered. Jesus Christ is the same yesterday and today and forever. These teachings do not change. Do not be led away by diverse and strange teachings, for it is well that the heart be strengthened by grace, not by foods, which have not benefited their adherents. We have an altar from which those who serve the tent have no right to eat. For the bodies of those animals whose blood is brought into the sanctuary by the high priest as a sacrifice for sin are burned outside the camp. So Jesus also suffered outside the gate in order to sanctify the people through his own blood. Therefore let us go forth to him outside the camp and bear the abuse he endured. For here we have no lasting city. But we seek the city which is to come, that heavenly Jerusalem. Through him, then, let us continually offer up a sacrifice of praise to God, that is, the fruit of lips that acknowledge his name. Do not neglect to do good, and to share what you have, for such sacrifices are pleasing to God. From the Liturgy Gospel according to St. Matthew. The Lord says to his disciples, "You are the light of the world. A city set on a hill cannot be hid. Nor do men light a lamp and put it under a bushel, but on a stand, and it gives light to all in the house." Now, he says this not because we are light of ourselves, but because the light of God is inside of us, and so we shine that light towards other people. If you look at iconography, Orthodox iconography, the lightness is always in the face. It is the lightest part of the picture, as opposed to Western art, where the face is darkened with shadows in order to have 3 dimensions. Orthodoxy always tries to show that the light source is not coming from an outside source that would bring shadows, but rather from inside, so the face is presenting the light. We are like lighthouses, shining that light of God towards people. Let your light so shine before men that they may see your good works and give glory to your Father who is in heaven, because that is the true source of the light. Think not that I have come to abolish the law and the prophets. I have come not to abolish them, but to fulfill them. For truly I say to you, till heaven and earth pass away, not an iota, not a dot, pass from the law until all is accomplished. Whoever then relaxes one of the least of these commandments that teaches men so, shall be called least in the kingdom of heaven. But he who does them and teaches them shall be called great in the kingdom of heaven. And these 3 luminaries truly are great. They are the bastion of education. This is why they are the patron saints of Greek education, and why we honor education on this great and holy feast. But for all who celebrate St. Basil the Great, St. Gregory the Theologian, St. John Chrysostom, Ronier Pala, may they always intercede and teach us to come closer to Christ. Regarding St. Basil the Great, Archbishop of Caesarea and Cappadocia. St. Basil the Great was born about the end of the year 329 in Caesarea of Cappadocia, a family renowned for their learning and holiness. His parents' names were Basil and Emily. His mother Emily, commemorated on July 19, and his grandmother Macrina, January 14th, are saints of the Church together with all his brothers and sisters. Macrina, his elder sister, July 19th, Gregory of Nyssa, January 10th, Peter of Sebastia, January 9th, and Navcratius. Basil studied in Constantinople under the sophist Libanius, then in Athens, where also he formed a friendship with the young Gregory, a fellow Cappadocian, later called the Theologian, one of the 3 hierarchs. Through the good influence of his sister Macrina, he chose to embrace the ascetical life, abandoning his worldly career. He visited the monks in Egypt, in Palestine, in Syria, and in Mesopotamia, and upon return to Caesarea, he departed to a hermitage on the Iris River in the Pontus, not far from Annecy, where his mother and his sister Macrina were already treading the path of the ascetical life. Here he also wrote his ascetical homilies. About the year 370, when the bishop of his country reposed, he was elected to succeed to his throne and was entrusted to the Church of Christ, which he tended for 8 years, living in voluntary poverty and strict asceticism, having no other care than to defend holy orthodoxy as a worthy successor of the apostles. The Emperor Valens and Modestus, the Eparch of the East, who were of one mind the Arians, tried with threats of exile and of torments to bend the saint to their own confession, because he was the bastion of orthodoxy in all Cappadocia, and preserved it from heresy when Arianism was at its strongest. But he set all their malice at naught, and in his willingness to give himself up to every suffering for the sake of the faith, showed himself to be a martyr by volition. Modestus, amazed at Basil's fearlessness in his presence, said that no one had ever so spoken to him. "Perhaps," answered the saint, "you have never met a bishop before." The Emperor Valens himself was almost won over by Basil's dignity and wisdom. When Valens' son fell gravely sick, he asked St. Basil to pray for him. Saint promised that his son would be restated if Valens agreed to have him baptized by the Orthodox. Valens agreed. Basil prayed, and the son was restored. But afterwards, the emperor had him baptized by Arians, and the child died soon after. Later, Valens, persuaded by his counselors, decided to send the saint into exile because he would not accept the Arians into communion. But his pen broke when he was signing the edict of banishment. He tried a second time, and a third, but the same thing happened, so that the emperor was filled with dread and tore up the document, and Basil was not banished. The truly great Basil spent the extreme ascetical practices and continual labors at the helm of the church, departed to the Lord on the 1st of January in 379, at the age of 49. His writings are replete with wisdom and erudition, and rich are these gifts he set forth to the doctrines concerning the mysteries both of the creation and of the Holy Trinity. Because of the majesty and keenness of his eloquence, he is honored as the revealer of Hippolytos, Coronafantor, and the Great. St. Basil is also commemorated on the 30th with the St. Gregory the Theologian and St. John Chrysostom. There should be noted a couple of the amazing things as to why St. Basil is called the Great. First and foremost, regarding the ascetical life with his mother and sister, St. Basil is the one that set up the Cenobitic lifestyle with balance. 8 hours of rest, 8 hours of prayer, 8 hours of work. And this model has been used in most monasteries throughout the entire world. St. Basil was the first to set up leprotoriums, a place to take care of the lepers so that they would not have to be out alone in the wilderness dying of their disease. St. Basil was the first to set up orphanages for those children that had been orphaned by war. And Basil is the one who is responsible for modern hospitals as we know them, because he said it is not right that people should be looking for a doctor, but rather they should come to a central place to find help. And so he created first modern hospitals. St. Basil basically set up the first social systems for people, which was absolutely incredible. And we see this to this day as he's honored by our own St. Basil's Academy in New York. Regarding the tradition of the Vassilopita, during one of the emperor's harsh taxes, he put an edict out that was unable to be fulfilled by the people, and so they were not able to pay with finances, and so they had to give up their treasures. St. Basil, seeing this and scandalized on behalf of his people, declared that this was not just, and so he went to the governor and said, "This is not right. How dare you? You should be ashamed of yourself." And so the governor repented and gave all of the treasures back to St. Basil. But it's not like all of the treasures had name tags so that they could say, okay, this spoon belongs to Kiri Makrina, this chalice belongs to Kiriyoyani. So then Basil came up with the idea that he would bake sweetbreads, and he put all of the treasures into the sweetbread. And as people were leaving church after his liturgy, they opened up their breads and found their exact treasure. To this day, people will have the Vassilopita tradition of having a coin, a frutti, inside the Vassilopita, and we've taken this to be erroneously a sign of good luck, that St. Basil is giving you good luck for the year, so everyone is hoping that they'll get the frutti. But what they don't understand is that it's not about luck. What the frutti symbolizes is a call from St. Basil specifically to help the poor, to help the church, because that was his passion, was to help people. And so St. Basil is calling you on a mission to help people, to serve God in this unique way. And when we do good things, when we do the blessings of the Lord, blessings come back to us, as Christ says, 100-fold. And so the blessings that we receive from the frutti are not by the frutti itself, but by the invitation of the saint to do the good work of Christ our God. Your voice has resounded throughout all the world, which has received your word in a godly manner. You taught dogma, clarified the nature of beings, and set in order the character of people. Venerable Father, royal priesthood, the name of Basil needs royalty, king. Intercede to Christ God to grant us great mercy. For the church are you in truth a firm foundation, granting inviolate lordship unto all mortal men, and sealing it with what you have taught, O righteous Basil, revealer of things divine. Regarding St. Gregory the Theologian, Archbishop of Constantinople. This great father and teacher of the Church was born in 329 in Arianzus, a village of the 2nd district of Cappadocia, not far from Nazianzus. His father, who later became Bishop of Nazianzus, was named Gregory, who we commemorate on January 1st, and his mother was named Nonna, who we commemorate on August 5th. Both are among the saints, and so are his brother, Caesarius, and his sister, Gorgona. At first he studied in Caesarea of Palestine, then in Alexandria, and finally in Athens. As he was sailing from Alexandria to Athens, a violent sea storm put in peril not only his life, but also his salvation, since he had not yet been baptized. With tears and fervor, he besought God to spare him, vowing to dedicate his whole self to him. And the tempest gave way to calm. At Athens, St. Gregory was later joined by St. Basil the Great, whom he already knew, but now their acquaintanceship grew into a lifelong brotherly love. Another fellow student of theirs in Athens was the young Prince Julian, who was later emperor, known as Julian the Apostate. Because he denied Christ and did all in his power to restore paganism. Even in Athens, before Julian had thrown off the mask of piety, St. Gregory saw what an unsettled mind he had and said, "What an evil the Roman state is nourishing." After their studies at Athens, Gregory became Basil's fellow ascetic, living the monastic life together with him for a time in the hermitages of Pontus. His father ordained him presbyter of the church of Nazianzus, and St. Basil consecrated him bishop of Sasima, which was in the archdiocese of Caesarea. This consecration was a source of great sorrow to Gregory, and a cause of misunderstanding between him and Basil, but his love for Basil remained unchanged, as can plainly be seen from his funeral oration of St. Basil. About the year 379, St. Gregory came to the assistance of the Church of Constantinople, which had already been troubled for 40 years by the Arians. By his supremely wise words and many labors, he freed it from the corruption of heresy, and was elected archbishop of that city by the Second Ecumenical Council, which assembled there in 381, and condemned Macedonius, archbishop of Constantinople, the enemy of the Holy Spirit, which was the main focus of that council. When St. Gregory came to Constantinople, the Arians had taken all the churches, and he was forced to serve in a house chapel dedicated to St. Athanasia the Martyr. From there, he began to preach his famous 5 sermons on the Trinity called the Triadica. When he left Constantinople 2 years later, the Arians did not have one church left to them in the city. St. Meletius of Antioch, whom we commemorate on February 12, who was presiding over the Second Ecumenical Council, died in the course of it, and St. Gregory was chosen in his stead. There he distinguished himself in his expositions of the dogmatic theology. Having governed the church until 382, he delivered his farewell speech, the Synaxis, in which he demonstrated the divinity of the Son before 150 bishops and the Emperor Theodosius the Great. In this speech he requested and received from all permission to retire from the see of Constantinople. He returned to Nazianzus, where he lived to the end of his life, and reposed in the Lord in 391, having lived some 62 years. His extant writings, both prose and poems in every type of meter, demonstrate his lofty eloquence and his wondrous breadth of learning. In the beauty of his writings, he is considered to have surpassed the Greek writers of antiquity, and because of his God-inspired theological thought, he received the surname Theologian. Although he is sometimes called Gregory of Nazianzus, this title belongs properly to his father. He himself is known by the Church only as St. Gregory the Theologian. He is especially called the Trinitarian Theologian, since in virtually every homily he referred to the Trinity and the one essence and nature of the Godhead. Hence, Alexius Anthoros dedicated the following verses to him. Like an unwandering star beaming with splendor, you bring us by mystic teachings, O Father, to the Trinity's sun-like illumination, O mouth breathing with fire, Gregory most mighty. St. Gregory the Theologian is still the gold standard of theological understanding for priests. The pastoral flute of your theology conquered the trumpets of orders, recalled upon the depths of the Spirit, and you were enriched with the beauty of words. Intercede to Christ our God, O Father Gregory, that our souls may be saved. O glorious one, you dispel the complexities of orders with the words of your theology. You adorn the Church with the vestures of orthodoxy, woven from on high. Clothed in this, the Church now cries out to your children with us, Hail, Father, the consummate theological mind. Regarding St. John Chrysostom, Archbishop of Constantinople, this greatest and most beloved of all Christian orders was born in Antioch in the year 344 or 347. His pious parents were called Secundus and Anthusa. After his mother was widowed at the age of 20, she devoted herself to bringing up John and his elder sister in the nurture and admonition of the Lord. John received his literary training under Anthragathius, the philosopher, and Libanius, the sophist, who was the greatest Greek scholar and rhetorician of his day. Libanius was a pagan, and when asked before his death whom he wished to have for his successor, he said, John, had not the Christians stolen him from us? With such training, with such gifts as he had by nature, John had before him a brilliant career as a rhetorician. A rhetorician, for those that are not aware, is somebody that is based in logic and able to argue. Part of the argument is rhetoric. meaning you establish a baseline and say, okay, you agree on this, I agree on this, and we both agree on this. But from this common plane, let's make our arguments to see if we can have an agreement. But through the good example of his godly mother Anthusa and of the holy bishop Meletius of Antioch, by whom he was ordained reader about the year 370, he chose instead to dedicate himself to God. From the years 374 to 381, he lived the monastic life in the hermitages that were near Antioch. His extreme asceticism undermined his health, compelling him to return to Antioch, where St. Meletius ordained him deacon about the year 381. St. Meletius was called to Constantinople later that year to preside over the Second Ecumenical Council, during which he fell asleep in the Lord. In 386, Bishop Flavian ordained John presbyter of the Church of Antioch. Upon his elevation to the priesthood, his career as a public preacher began, and his exceptional oratorical gifts were made manifest through his many sermons and commentaries. There are a couple of things that are important for us to understand here. First, St. John and St. Basil the Great were contemporaries, and St. John Chrysostom wrote a book on the holy priesthood in which he has a dialogue with St. Basil the Great as to why he should not enter into the priesthood, showing us that St. John Chrysostom had such reverence for the holy priesthood and for the work of the priesthood that he felt he was ill-equipped, though he has a prayerful humility in everything that he does. His commentaries and sermons were distinguished by their eloquence and the remarkable ease with which rich imagery and scriptural allusions are multiplied by their depth of insight into the meaning of Scripture and the working of God's providence, not least of all by their earnestness and moral force, which issued from the heart of a blameless and guileless man who lived first what he preached to others. It is also understood, if you look at the skull of St. John Chrysostom, that his ear is still intact on the skull, even though the rest of the skull, of course, has vanished after his death. This ear is intact because it is said that St. Paul and angels whispered to him the true meaning of what was written so that St. John Chrysostom clearly understood. Chrysostom literally means golden mouth because he was so eloquent in everything that he preached. It was like gold pouring forth from his mouth. Because of his fame, he was chosen to succeed St. Nectarios as Patriarch of Constantinople. He was taken away by stealth to avoid the opposition of the people and consecrated Patriarch of Constantinople on February 28, 398 by Theophilus, Patriarch of Alexandria, who was to prove his mortal enemy. At that time, the Emperor of the East was Arcadius, who had St. Arsenius the Great as his tutor. Arcadius was a man of weak character and much under the influence of his wife Eudoxia. The zealous and upright Chrysostom's unsparing censures of the lax morals in the imperial city stung the vain Eudoxia. Through Theophilus' plotting and her collaboration, St. John was banished to Pontus in 403. The people were in an uproar, and the following night an earthquake shook the city. This so frightened the Empress Eudoxia that she begged Arcadius to call Chrysostom back. While his return was triumphant, his reconciliation with the Empress did not last long. When she had a silver statue of herself erected in the Forum before the Church of the Holy Wisdom, St. Sophia, September of 403, and had it dedicated with much unseemly revelry, St. John thundered against her, and she could not forgive him. In June of 404, he was exiled to Cucusus, on the borders of Sicilia and Armenia. From here, he exchanged letters with Pope Innocent of Rome, who sent bishops and priests to Constantinople requesting that a council be held. St. John's enemies, dreading his return, prevailed upon the emperor to see an insult in this, and had John taken to a more remote place of banishment called Idius, near Caucasus. The journey was filled with bitter sufferings for the aged bishop, both because of the harshness of the elements and the cruelty of one of his 310 guards. He did not reach Pityus, but gave up his soul to the Lord near Comana, in Pontus, at the chapel of the martyr Basilicus, who had appeared to him shortly before, foretelling the day of his death, which came to pass on September 14, 407. His last words were, "Glory be to God for all things." His holy relics were brought from Comana to Constantinople 31 years later by the Emperor Theodosius the Younger, and St. Pulcheria, his sister, the children of Arcadius and Eudoxia, with fervent supplications that the sin of their parents against him be forgiven. This return of his holy relics is celebrated on January 27th. St. John was surnamed Chrysostom, Golden Mouth, because of his eloquence. He made exhaustive commentaries on the divine scriptures, was the author of more works than any other church father, leaving us complete commentaries on the books of Genesis, the Gospels of Saints Matthew and John, the Acts, and all the epistles of St. Paul. The extant works are 1,447 sermons and 240 epistles. 22 teachers of the church have written homilies of praise in his honor. Besides his feast day today and on January 27th, he is celebrated as one of the three hierarchs on January 30th, together with St. Basil the Great, St. Gregory the Theologian. It should be noted that because September 14th is the exaltation of the cross, the saint's memory has been transferred to this day. The grace of your words illumined the universe like a shining beacon. It amassed treasures of munificence in the world. It demonstrated the greatness of humility, teaching us by your own words. Therefore, O Father John Chrysostom, intercede to Christ the Logos, the salvation of our souls. You received the divine grace from heaven, and by your own lips taught all to worship the one God in Trinity. All blessed venerable John Chrysostom, deservedly we praise you, for you are teacher, clearly revealing things divine. I hope that you've enjoyed today's Spiritual Calisthenics. Have a blessed and wonderful day.